So Dustin Poirier has let us in on why he chose the Conor trilogy over the title fight. And look, there's going to be no surprise here. It was about the money. And Poirier just said, look, fighting Conor pays 4 times what fighting for the title pays. And I have no problem with the fact that he disclosed this. I feel that he stated the obvious. Whether he would have said this or not, we all would have known that. Maybe we didn't know it was 25%, but I think that we get the point. I think that was what all of our guesses were. And I mean, look, the mask is off. Apparently, Dustin Poirier has a price. It seems that everybody has a price. And is he willing to put his goal of the championship aside? Yeah. I mean, it comes back to the old joke. Winston Churchill walks into a bar, walks up to a girl and says, would you sleep with me for $1,000? And she says, well, yes. And he says, would you sleep with me for $1? And he said, I'm not. And she says, no, I'm not a whore. And he said, man, we already established what you are. Now we're just negotiating price. But it does bring you back, right? I mean, I can't help but look at what Poirier is saying, of which I have no problem with. But it was just 3 weeks ago. People are upset about what Logan and Jake Paul were making. I remember Francis Ngannou sending another tweet. What are we doing wrong? It's not a matter of anything wrong. The size of the audience directly reflects the size of your participation. And that's all that Poirier is talking about. But what needs to be observed is it happens in this sport too. It doesn't just happen in some entertainment spoof or some sideshow. You don't have to have one of the twins there or one of the Mayweathers there. If there's a huge audience and a huge crowd, it can affect your participation. Speaking of this fight, I've had a lot of fun with this. I've had a lot of fun with the buildup because of the speculation, right? And I would encourage people, I would encourage them to remove the last fight from their memory if they're attempting to handicap this contest. Only because that was the single worst Conor McGregor we have ever seen. But we have reason to know and understand that as to why. The layoff, the absence, in lieu of what he wanted. I mean, Conor McGregor against Donald Cerrone was an amazing performance by Conor. But the post-fight was just as amazing when he revealed to the world, I'm going to fight 4 times this year. This is 1. I want 3 more in the next 11 months. He was serious, and we didn't give it to him. So now he's stuck with a layoff in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, training was bizarre for everybody in that. He's in Fight Island. He's across from a guy who he thinks he knows because he's been in there with him before. I mean, there was a lot of things where you could just look at and justify. This is before you get into the calf kicks. So much has been made about the calf kicks, and I don't begrudge that. It was a very real thing. I only share with you all of the problems that Conor had leading into this fight before we start talking about a weapon that he was unfamiliar with. Okay. Along the vein of enjoying the thought, Chris Weidman has weighed in. Chris Weidman weighed in essentially saying that Conor lost some of his swagger, that Conor used to walk to the ring as though I own it, and that he doesn't have that same confidence and aura, and that Chris can see and observe that there's a different Conor. Dan Hardy weighed in and said, I think that Conor McGregor is an overall better martial artist. I think he has a better application of martial arts, better strategy, better control of distance and range. All right. Where that becomes interesting isn't Weidman's opinion. It isn't Hardy's opinion. Chael comes in, shows his opinion. That's not what's interesting. What's interesting is Hardy, Weidman, and whoever else decides to weigh in on this is letting you into their psyche. They're letting you into their approach into this. Weidman must feel at some point that walk to the ring and that confidence and aura as you leave the locker room is greatly helpful within his own career. And Dan Hardy must look at the sport as though who understands it better, who is a greater mastery of the techniques is likely to win. Neither guy's wrong. It's just interesting to hear these top-level guys reveal and let us in to their own makeup. And of those 2 breakdowns, I will tell you, Dan Hardy surprised me more. I completely concur with what Dan said, that it has to do with skill, that it has to do with range, that it has to do with an application of the understanding of the techniques themselves, as long as we're only talking about the first round. The first round is about who's better. The rest of the fight is about who's tougher. That's where the fight starts. It's a sport in the first round. First 5 minutes is all about a sport. And how did you prepare? What is your IQ? After that, it is straight chaos, where you were digging deep. You were turning to the techniques that you learned when you were 10 and 11 and 14 years old. Absolutely nothing else. You're looking for survival. You're waiting to hear the horn. You're counting down the time in your head, how much time is. I mean, it's just one of these things where the fight doesn't break out in the first round. That's a sporting contest. That's a battle of skill. After the first round, right, when a guy's nose is bleeding, when his eye is swollen, when his heart rate is up, that's where the fight begins. And you can break down those techniques. I just don't know how accurate you would be over history to discover great techniques and combinations and setups later in a contest. That's where you see that heart and that grit and that determination. That's where it becomes very straightforward. Who's staying on the outside? Who's getting in and doing the work? Who prefers to be in one of those areas? I mean, that's where it really comes down to. Now, I'm not disagreeing with Dan Hardy. I'm just sharing this. He let us in on his mindset. Maybe that's all I'm doing now. I'm letting you in on my mindset. But Weidman also let us know that the approach for him, how do you feel before Bruce Buffer ever says your name? And it's one of those deals where each fighter is different. It's why if you get 10 of us together, we can never agree on an upcoming contest. You would think, well, I have great insight here. Let me just speak to one of the pros, and then I'll go put my money down with the pro says. Pros get it wrong all the time because all that they can do is follow the golden rule of treat somebody else the way you'd want to be treated. How would I react in a situation if I was in this situation? Not a lot of undefeated fighters out there, right? I mean, there's not a lot of guys out there that know the perfect recipe or how to deal with it. I will share with you. I love the idea of technique, and I looked at myself as a technician. That was the most interesting part for me. It was the only part of practice that I really enjoyed. I liked learning different setups, and I liked learning different executions. I viewed myself as a technician. If you get a Chael Sonnen technique video, you're going to have some good technique, spend a lifetime to a core. I will just tell you that I also know in my heart when the going gets tough, and it gets there pretty damn fast, it's not about the perfect technique. Sometimes you got to just grab a guy and throw him down. That old wrestling coach, Rick Stewart, used to tell us that all the time. I can work on the technique, and you pull here, and you move the elbow, and you rotate, and you come to one knee, and you switch to. Sometimes you got to grab a guy and throw him down. I got to work with Coach Kenny Adams, military's coach. He was Clayton Heyer's coach. Got to work with him one day, and we were talking about body shots, coming in and trying to get to that liver, get to the body. And I remember Coach Adams said 20 different times, there's a lot of different setups. There's a lot of things you can look for him to do. There's a slip. There's a way you can turn. If you can just walk up to a guy and hit him right in that spot, it's the same thing. So you can overthink this, or you can see the target, take your hand and run it into it. I think that that's more of the theory that is going to apply to Dustin Poirier only because of the activity. With that activity comes timing. With that timing comes conditioning, and it would just seem to me it would behoove Poirier more. But I think that Hardy makes a good point, which is as long as Conor cannot make this about grit and toughness, as long as he can make it about sport and technique, he is a true master.